The scent of citrus and ammonia was the only thing that felt real. It clung to the air in the penthouse office, a sharp, clean anchor in a world of silent, gleaming surfaces. Imani pushed the industrial buffer across the polished black marble, her reflection a soft, blurred shape against the sharp lines of the city's skyline. The machine hummed, a low and steady companion in the dead of night. From 60 floors up, Tokyo was a glittering circuit board, a tapestry of light and promise that felt a million miles away. Here, she was just a ghost in a gray uniform, one of the invisible army that descended after the executives in their tailored suits had gone home, erasing the day's smudges and footprints, resetting the stage for the next performance of power. Imani didn't mind the solitude. It was predictable, safe. She could put in her earbuds, listen to a podcast, and let her mind drift. Her body, full and strong, knew the rhythms of the work. The bend of her knees, the sweep of her arm, the pressure needed to coax a shine from stone. This office, however, was different. It belonged to the man at the very top, Kaito Tanaka, the CEO of Tanaka Innovations, a tech empire whose tendrils reached into every corner of the globe. His space was less an office and more a temple to minimalism and control. A single, massive desk of obsidian-like wood stood like an altar in the center of the room. One chair behind it, two before it.
No clutter.
No personal effects, save for a single, perfectly pruned bonsai tree in a ceramic pot. The air itself seemed different up here, thinner, colder, charged with an authority so absolute it felt like a physical weight. Imani finished the floors and moved to the desk, her cart of supplies rattling softly. She sprayed the surface with a gentle cleaner, the mist hanging in the air for a second before she began to wipe it down with a microfiber cloth. She worked with a focused efficiency, her movements practiced and sure. The city lights cast long shadows across the room. That was when the elevator chimed. Her hand froze mid-wipe. No one ever came up this late. The cleaning crews had their own service elevators and a strict schedule. The executive floors were supposed to be empty by midnight. The private elevator doors slid open with a whisper, and he stepped out. Kaito Tanaka. She'd only ever seen him in corporate photos or from a great distance in the lobby. In person, he was an exercise in brutal precision. His suit was a deep charcoal gray that seemed to absorb the light, tailored so perfectly it looked less like fabric and more like a second skin. He wasn't a large man, but he moved like the room owed him space, his presence filling every empty corner. His black hair was cut sharp, his features angular and severe. But it was his stillness that was most unnerving. He didn't walk into the room. He materialized in it, a predator taking stock of its territory. Imani felt her heart kick against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. She instinctively lowered her head, trying to make herself smaller, more invisible. She was just the janitor, a smudge to be ignored.
He didn't speak.
The only sound was the faint click of his leather-soled shoes on the marble as he walked toward the desk. He stopped on the other side, his gaze sweeping over the pristine surface, then flicking to her, then away, as if she were just another piece of furniture. He placed a slim, silver laptop on the desk, then rested his hand beside it. And that's when she saw it. It was a gold signet ring on his right pinky finger. Heavy, old, the kind of piece that carried history. The light from the window caught the design carved into its face. A crane, its neck elegantly arched, but with one of its wings distinctly, deliberately broken. The breath caught in Imani's throat. The microfiber cloth fell from her hand, landing silently on the desk. All the air, all the sound, all the careful invisibility she'd cultivated, vanished. The world narrowed to that single point of light on his hand. The words left her mouth before her brain could stop them. They were quiet, barely a murmur, but in the crushing silence of the office, they sounded like a shout. "Sir," she said, her voice rough. "My dad has a ring like yours." Kaito Tanaka went still. It was a terrifying stillness, not of peace, but of absolute, focused threat. The shift was instantaneous. One moment, he was a remote, powerful executive. The next, Every line of his body radiated a lethal danger that had nothing to do with boardrooms and stock prices. His head turned slowly, and for the first time, he truly looked at her. His eyes were dark, not brown or black, but the flat, depthless obsidian of a starless night sky. They held no warmth, only a chilling, analytical intelligence. And then she saw it, a flicker of something behind the ice. The blood drained from his face, leaving his skin the color of old parchment. He hadn't just heard her. He had been struck. "What did you say?" His voice was low, a silken rasp that sent a shiver down her spine. It was not a question. It was a demand for information he would take, one way or another. Imani swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The instinct to survive screamed at her to apologize, to say she was mistaken, to shrink back into the shadows and disappear. But the image of her father's hand, larger, darker, calloused from a lifetime of work, wearing that same ring, was seared into her mind. "The ring," she repeated, her voice trembling slightly. She pointed a hesitant finger. "The crane with the broken wing. My father, he has one. Exactly like it." He didn't look at his hand. His eyes remained locked on hers, searching, dissecting. He took a single, deliberate step around the desk, closing the distance between them. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of his cologne. Something clean and sharp, like cedar and cold night air. "Your father's name," he commanded. "Marcus," she whispered. "Marcus Thorne." Kaido's expression was unreadable, a mask carved from granite. He pulled a phone from his inner jacket pocket, his movements economical and precise. He tapped the screen once, never breaking eye contact with her. "Find everything you can on a man named Marcus Thorne," he said into the phone, his Japanese swift and guttural. "American. Likely ex-military. He has a daughter working in this building. Her name is Imani Thorne. I want to know where he is, who he was, and how he came to possess something that does not belong to him. You have 1 hour." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. 1 hour. The words echoed in the silence. "You will wait here," he said. It was not a request. He gestured to one of the severe leather chairs in front of his desk. Imani's mind was reeling. This was a mistake. A terrible, life-altering mistake. She should have kept her mouth shut. She should have been invisible. She was just a janitor. A plus-sized black girl trying to make a living in a foreign country, a world away from home. She had no place in whatever storm she had just unleashed. I have to finish my shift," she stammered, a pathetic attempt at normalcy. A flicker of something, not amusement, but a cold acknowledgement of her naivete, crossed his face. "Your shift is the least of your concerns right now."
Sí.
She sat. The leather was cold against the back of her legs. He didn't return to his side of the desk. Instead, he moved to the vast window, standing with his back to her, a perfect silhouette against the city. He was waiting, and she was his prisoner. The polished marble floor now felt like the surface of a frozen lake, and she could feel the ice cracking beneath her feet. The hour that followed was the longest of Imani's life. The silence was a living thing, pressing in on her, punctuated only by the faint hum of the building's climate control. Kaido didn't move from the window. He just stood there, a statue of impending judgment. Imani's thoughts raced. She thought of her dad, a retired mechanic living a quiet life in Georgia. He was a good man, a gentle giant who loved fishing and old jazz records. How could he be connected to this cold, dangerous man? The ring had always been a mystery. Her dad wore it every day. When she was little, she'd asked him about it. He'd just smiled, a sad, distant look in his eyes, and said, "It was a gift. From a brother I lost a long time ago." He never said more, and she learned not to ask. It was a part of him, like the faint scar above his eyebrow or the way he hummed when he was working. Kaido's phone buzzed, the sound unnaturally loud. He answered it, listening intently. His side of the conversation was short, just a series of clipped affirmations in Japanese. When he hung up, he finally turned around. His face was still a mask, but his eyes held a new, sharper focus. "Marcus Thorne," Kaido said, the name sounding foreign and clinical in his mouth. Sergeant, United States Army. Stationed in Okinawa, 1998 to 2002. Honorably discharged. He was a friend of my brother. Brother. The word hung in the air, connecting with her father's old explanation. Daisuke, Kaido continued, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. My older brother. He was the one who was supposed to lead our family. He was betrayed. Murdered by our rivals, the Hashimoto clan. Imani felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a ring. It was a relic. A piece of a violent, hidden history she had stumbled into. Your father was with him that night, Kaido said, his gaze pinning her to the chair. Daisuke knew he was walking into a trap. He gave your father the ring, the seal of our family's second-in-command, and told him to run.
To get out of the country.
Daisuke used his own death as a diversion to save his friend's life. He paused, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. I was supposed to be there as his backup. I was delayed. By the time I arrived, it was over. My brother was gone. The ring was gone. For 20 years, I believed it was at the bottom of Tokyo Bay. The confession was delivered like a damage report, but Imani could feel the shame radiating from him. It was the source of his coldness, the wound he carried beneath the perfect suit. He had failed the person he was meant to protect. My father, Imani began, her voice barely a whisper. He never spoke of it. He just said it was from a brother. He honored his debt by staying silent, Kaido said. And by keeping the ring safe. The Hashimotos have searched for it for 2 decades. It is a symbol of a promise they broke, a victory they stole. To have it surface now, he left the sentence unfinished, the implications hanging in the air. Suddenly, a low thud echoed from the direction of the stairwell door, followed by a muffled shout. Kaido's head snapped up. His stillness was gone, replaced by a coiled energy. They know, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He pulled his phone out again, speaking rapidly in Japanese. E-level. West stairwell. Lock down the building. He moved toward Imani, grabbing her arm. His grip was like steel. We are leaving.
Now.
He pulled her toward a section of the wall that looked like a bookshelf. He pressed a spot, and a panel slid open, revealing a small, private elevator. The main one was now a death trap. Where are we going? She asked, her heart hammering. To somewhere you will be safe, he said, pushing her inside. You are now a part of this. The Hashimotos will not see you as a janitor. They will see you as a message. And they will try to erase you. The elevator descended, a silent drop through the heart of the building. In the confined space, his presence was overwhelming. The cedar scent of his cologne, the warmth of his body so close to hers. He hadn't let go of her arm. He was her captor and her protector, the source of the danger and her only way out of it. She had a choice, a fleeting moment where she could have screamed, fought, or tried to run back in the office. But looking at the cold certainty on his face, she knew it was pointless. More than that, a strange, terrifying thought surfaced. Running felt more dangerous than staying with him. She stayed silent. She had made her choice. They emerged in a sub-level parking garage, a concrete bunker filled with black, identical sedans. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the shadows, bowing their heads slightly to Kaido. They moved with the same quiet efficiency as their boss. The residence, Kaido ordered. One of the men opened the rear door of a sedan. Kaido pushed her inside before sliding in beside her. The doors closed with a heavy, final thud, sealing them in a world of tinted glass and black leather. The car pulled away smoothly, accelerating into the empty night streets of Shinjuku. The residence was a fortress in the sky, a penthouse apartment that made his office look modest. It was a cage of glass and steel, with panoramic views of the city. But there were no escape routes here. The windows were reinforced, the doors were guarded, and Kaido Tanaka was a constant, unnerving presence. For 3 days, she was his prisoner. He provided her with clothes, food, anything she needed, but he never let her out of his sight. He worked from a command center set up in the living area, his men coming and going like wraiths. She learned the language of his world through osmosis, whispers of territories, shipments, and the ever-present threat of the Hashimoto clan. She watched him. She saw the way his soldiers looked at him, with a mixture of fear and absolute devotion. She saw the tactical mind at work as he dismantled the Hashimoto clan's attempts to find them. He never raised his voice, never showed emotion. His power was in his stillness, his control. But she also saw other things. The way he would pause and look at the bonsai tree on his windowsill, the same species as the one in his office. The way his long fingers would trace the rim of his teacup. And sometimes, late at night, when he thought she was asleep on the couch, she would see him staring out at the city, the weight of 2 decades of failure etched onto his face. The attack came at dawn on the 4th day. They were moving to a different safe house. An ambush. A black van slammed into their sedan, sending the car spinning across the slick pavement. The squeal of tires was followed by the spiderwebbing crack of the windows as bullets hit the armored glass. Kaito reacted before Imani could even scream. In one fluid motion, he unbuckled her seatbelt and threw his body over hers, shielding her as the car rocked from another impact. Her face was pressed into the fine wool of his suit jacket. She could feel the hard, steady beat of his heart against her cheek, smell the cedar and the sharper, metallic scent of cordite. Outside, his men were returning fire. The world was a symphony of chaos, shouting, gunfire, shattering glass. But in her small pocket of survival, there was only the solid weight of him, the surprising heat of his body. He was a shield of muscle and resolve. For a terrifying second, she felt him jolt, a sharp intake of breath, and a hot, primal fear seized her. Not for herself, but for him. The thought of him being hurt was a physical blow. When the shooting stopped, the silence was more jarring than the noise. He pushed himself off her slowly. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice strained. "No," she managed to say. "You?" He ignored the question, his eyes scanning the scene outside. One of his men opened the door. "We have them, sir. 3 down, 1 captured." As they were being hustled into a new car, Imani saw the captured Hashimoto soldier. He was on his knees, his face bloody. One of Kaito's men stood behind him, a pistol aimed at his head. Kaito gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Imani knew she should look away, but she couldn't. She had to see. She had to know what this world she was in truly was. The gunshot was a flat, ugly sound that the city swallowed without a trace. She didn't flinch. She just watched, her expression grim. She had crossed a line. She was no longer just a witness. Her presence here had caused this. Back in the new safe house, the adrenaline began to fade, leaving a hollow trembling in its place. Kaito stood by the window, his back to her again. The sleeve of his white shirt was torn, and a dark stain was spreading across his side. He had been hit after all. "You should have run," he said, his voice quiet. "Back in the office. You had the chance." "Where would I have gone?" she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "They would have found me. You said so yourself." Perhaps, he turned to face her. His mask was back in place, but his eyes were dark with something she couldn't name. "My brother trusted your father. He saw strength in a man everyone else saw as an outsider. I am beginning to understand his judgment." It was the closest he'd ever come to a compliment, to an admission of any kind of connection between them. It was more dangerous than a declaration of love. "I told myself I stayed because I had no choice," Imani said, the words tasting like truth and ash in her mouth. "That's not true anymore." His gaze intensified. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with the chaos of the ambush, the echo of the gunshot, the shared, stolen breaths in the back of the car. He took a step toward her, then another. He stopped just before her, so close she could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "Imani," he said. He said her name differently than anyone else ever had, not as a label but as a statement, a fact. Before either of them could say or do anything else, his phone rang. His second in command. The news was bad. The Hashimotos had found out about her father. They hadn't made a direct threat, but they had sent a message, a picture of her father's quiet, suburban house in Georgia. The war was no longer just his. It was hers. "He's an old man," she said, a cold dread seeping into her bones. "He's not part of this." "He's been a part of this for 20 years, Kaido corrected her, his voice hard as steel. "He just didn't know the war was still being fought. Hashimoto has proposed a meeting. He wants to trade." "Trade what?" "The ring," Kaido said. "For a truce. And for your father's guaranteed safety." "It's a trap," she said immediately. "Of course it is," he agreed. "He doesn't want the ring. He wants me. And he wants to eliminate the last piece of my brother's legacy. You." Kaido's plan was to go to the meeting and end it. On his terms. He forbade her from coming. But Imani had spent the last day doing more than just waiting. She had called her father. She hadn't told him everything, just that she was in trouble and it had to do with the ring. And her father, after a long silence, had told her where to look. In the false bottom of his old army footlocker, there was a letter. A letter from Daisuke, written the day he died. She had her father's neighbor retrieve it and send her photos. The letter detailed his friendship with Marcus, but it also contained something else. A ledger. A record of the secret payments the Hashimoto patriarch had been making to a rival Yakuza clan in Osaka, a betrayal that would shatter his alliances if it were revealed. Daisuke had been on his way to expose him when he was killed. It was leverage. It was a weapon. When Kaido was preparing to leave, Imani stood in his way. She held up her phone, showing him the pictures of the letter. "You're not going alone," she said. "This isn't just your fight. That ring is the reason my father is alive. It represents a debt my family has held for 20 years. I am going to be there when it's paid." He looked from the phone to her face, and for the first time, she saw a crack in his armor. It was a flicker of raw, undisguised admiration. He gave a single, sharp nod. The meeting was in a neutral location, a traditional, empty restaurant in Ginza. Mr. Hashimoto was an old man with venomous eyes, surrounded by his soldiers. Kaido's men were positioned outside. He and Imani walked in alone. "Tanaka," Hashimoto sneered. "You bring the janitor with you? Does she polish your shoes before a fight?" Before Kaido could respond, Imani stepped forward. "I am Imani Thorn," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Daughter of Marcus Thorn, the man your clan failed to kill 20 years ago." She held up her phone. "And I am the keeper of Daisuke's last words, including his records of your family's payments to the council in Osaka." Hashimoto's face went slack with shock. The color drained from his cheeks. He had walked into his own trap. Kaido used the moment of stunned silence, not for violence, but for a surgical strike. He laid out his terms. The Hashimoto clan would cede their most profitable territory, they would publicly renounce their claim against his family, and they would disappear from his world. Or the ledger went public. It was a bloodless execution. An empire dismantled with a few quiet words. After, they stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city lights a silent witness below them. The war was over. A cost had been paid on both sides. To secure the deal, Kaido had to forgive a long-standing debt owed to him by the Osaka Council, a strategic loss for a greater peace. Nothing was free. He turned to her, the wind whipping a loose strand of her hair across her face. He reached out, not to tuck it away, but to gently cup her jaw, his thumbs stroking her skin. "It's over," he said. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice quiet. He took the crane ring from his own finger. The gold was warm against his skin. He didn't put it on her. Instead, he pressed it into her palm and closed her fingers around it. "My brother gave this to your father for safekeeping," he said, his obsidian eyes holding hers. "It belongs to the one who honors the debt. It belongs to you." He wasn't giving her a piece of jewelry. He was giving her a piece of himself, of his history. He was acknowledging her place in his world. "You are safe here, Imani," he said. It wasn't a question or a suggestion. It was a statement of absolute fact.
A vow.
He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. He lifted her other hand, the one not holding the ring, and brought it to his mouth, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her knuckles. It was an act of fealty, a claim, a promise of a world she had never asked for, but had, against all odds, chosen. And looking into the eyes of the most dangerous man in Tokyo, she knew, with terrifying certainty, that she was finally home.